So you know that you've been in Britain too long when you start to find the phrase can't complain deeply suspicious. Because trust me, in this neck of the woods, everyone can and everyone will. Today, we're going to talk about how the British have turned complaining into an art form and why, against all odds, I think I might actually admire it a little bit. Welcome to the land of polite grumbling. As an American, I arrived here thinking moaning was something you did when you stubbed your toe. But no, in Britain, moaning is a lifestyle, kind of a national sport. It's this like delicate form of emotional jazz, if you will. Rain, too much. Sunshine, too much. Public transport, always to something, either late, early, or I don't know, just not what it used to be. Never anger, mind you, though. It's more like this subtle, gentle disappointment. Like in supermarkets, trains, parks, pubs, even the corner cafe isn't safe from a quiet little critique about how the temperature of the milk isn't quite right. There are many flavors of British moaning as well. You have the weather moan, which is an absolute classic here in British culture. So Brits don't just remark on the rain like, hey, it's raining out, or ooh, it's kind of hard. They actually dissect it. Is it persistent? Is it dreary? Is it suspiciously damp for this time of year? There's almost this poetry about it. Then you have the public transport moan, which absolutely deserves a chapter of its own. It's quiet, still respectful, and absolutely thorough. They don't yell. They just kind of sigh, maybe shake their heads, look up at the timetable and then their watch several times. And it kind of almost as if there was a time when I trusted you, but now I don't. And I don't think I ever will again. Then we have the polite service mode, often accompanied by a timid little smile and the phrase, I don't want to be a bother, but it's delicate, it's precise, it's rehearsed, and very ritualistic. The best one, the nostalgia moan, which usually begins with something along the lines of, well, when I was a lad, back in the day, and ends somewhere between wistfulness and mild judgment. Apparently, everything used to be better, and the subtle implication is you'll never understand. And me, as an American, will definitely never understand. Here's the thing. Even in the smallest little things, cues, coffee temperature, the choice of music on the bus, there's just always something to moan about in British culture. And for some reason, the Brits actually make it a little bit charming. I know, I'm kind of surprised I'm saying that out loud as well, but it's the truth. This is what I've come up with as I've lived here for 2.5 years. Moaning kind of matters to British culture, and here's why. At first, I thought it was just a lot of negativity. I mean, I come from a place where we're positive. We're always looking for, the silver lining. We're always rooting for the underdog. So hearing people moan constantly all day long was really grating on me for a long time. But then I started to really understand that it's actually more kind of social bonding instead. It's almost like the British handshake, kind of like a shared misery amongst the whole culture. You join the conversation not by asking, how are you? But by muttering, big grin today, isn't it? It's like an instant connection. That is the small talk, no other small talk required. It's emotional efficiency, basically. And why waste time pretending everything is great when you can bond over how it absolutely isn't? It's really creative as well because the British seem to take something as simple as a mild inconvenience and stretch it into this like epic observation with all of this poetic rose around it. Rose? There's a subtle irony and there's always a little bit of exaggeration and a slight bit of performance with it. You don't complain, you craft a story about your moan. But there are rules that you have to follow to do this properly, I've learned. So here are the unspoken laws in order to moan properly as a British person. You can't be dramatic. You can't be like we are in America where it's over the top. We're not auditioning for soap operas. A simple sigh or eye roll will do. 2, you have to add self-deprecation there somewhere. It's just something that the Brits do. I think it's to humble themselves and to make sure they're not getting too ahead of their class or too much higher than they think they are in their status in the culture. Something like, I'm probably overreacting, but usually works wonders. 3, balance it with some optimism. It's dreadful out there, but at least the bins got emptied. As if you're finding the silver lining, you're just not making it super over the top. And then number 4, of course, you moan communally. Solitary moaning is suspicious, and that's when people start thinking it's a negative. But if you moan with others, especially about the same topic, it's considered polite, bonding, and affirming. Breaking these rules is a very risky step, so don't overdo it. You will be labeled as a negative Nancy, or you will be labeled as someone who just doesn't know how to control their emotions. Underdo it, and you appear oddly cheerful. And that's worse than complaining incorrectly, apparently, as I've learned. I've been told many times anyway. So being an American here in Britain, I've found this endlessly fascinating. Now that I've gotten over the everyone's negative kind of initial response. At first, I was really exhausted by it because that's what I thought all the time. Then I started to learn a little bit more about the culture and learn a bit more about the British people as a whole. And I started to notice some subtle genius about their moaning. It keeps conversations low stakes. So you don't have to get too involved. You don't have to get too personal, but you can still have a little bit of banter and you can still have a little bit of commonality with the person that you're speaking with, and you still protect all of your privacy. It's a polite way of releasing tension without causing conflict. British culture is really centralized around this let's not upset the herd mentality unless absolutely necessary. They're polite to a fault. They apologize for things that aren't there. They apologize to inanimate objects in order to just keep the peace, to make sure there's no upsetting the herd in any way. Not to avoid necessarily, but just to not get bogged down into a conflict that it seems unnecessary or unwarranted or not worth their time or energy. I think that moaning is kind of a release valve a little bit for them, but they do a little bit of moan. It might not necessarily be about the rain in particular, but they use it as an excuse to release that tension. And then they form that camaraderie with other British people over the rain, even though it might not necessarily be about rain specifically. And lastly, I feel like it might be a little bit of culture meditation, a kind of way for British people to come together and acknowledge that the world isn't perfect, but we can acknowledge that and move on and do it with a little bit of panache and charm, as the British tend to do everything with. Here's the kicker though. I kind of feel like it might be rubbing off on me a little bit. Now that I understand it, I feel myself doing it a little bit more often than I used to. Like yesterday, it was drizzling, and I found myself saying, yeah, typical. It's England. Of course it's drizzling. And now here I am doing an entire video complaining about how much British people complain. It's kind of terrifying, but a little bit thrilling. I may have crossed that line from bemused observer to a full participant. I'm moaning, but I have purpose and cadence, and I've got my own little style on it. I even pause a little bit before finishing sentences just to let the listener contemplate the full weight of each little grievance. Maybe that's the true British conversion that I'm going to fulfill, not necessarily picking up the accent, not even speaking all of the slang and phrases, and not becoming obsessed with tea, but learning the art of a good British moan. And honestly, I can't complain. Okay, maybe I actually can, and I probably will.